Okay, so I just want to give some initial information. So I'll present for about 45 minutes. I'm asking during this time again that you keep your camera and microphone off. If you do have questions during the course of the presentation, you're welcome to type those questions in the chat. Or you can save that question for the end of the presentation when, again, there will be plenty of time. As you notice, I am recording this presentation for folks that can't attend. If you do have to step away, which happens, especially if you're someone that is currently working or in school, other obligations come up, I can always send you a copy of the recording for anything that you missed. My name is Cindy Waldeck. I'm the Recruitment and Awards Specialist for the Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So this presentation is specifically for the full-time MSW program. There's a lot of things that overlap between the full-time and the part-time program in terms of curriculum, kind of resources at the school, but there are aspects that are different. The biggest thing to keep in mind is that the part-time program has Saturday courses. It's 2 years for students entering with their Bachelor of Social Work, or 4 years for students entering with their without their Bachelor of Social Work, and it is on a hybrid model. But again, there's more information on our website if you'd like to learn more, or reach out to me and I'm happy to talk you through some of those differences. And again, we'll have lots of time at the end for questions, so feel free to ask as we go along. If it's relevant to where we're at in the presentation, I may answer as we go, otherwise I'll save it for the end. And so now I'm going to stop my camera. Okay. So before we get started with the remainder of the presentation, I would like to read a land acknowledgement to respect and recognize Indigenous peoples and the land on which UW-Madison sits and I work and live. A land acknowledgement is a simple way of resisting the erasure of Indigenous histories and working towards honoring and inviting the truth. The University of Wisconsin-Madison and the Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work occupy ancestral Ho-Chunk land, a place their nation has called Dejope since time immemorial. In an 1832 treaty, the Ho-Chunk were forced to cede this territory. Decades of ethnic cleansing followed when both the federal and state government repeatedly but unsuccessfully sought to forcibly remove the Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin. This history of colonization informs our shared future of collaboration and innovation. Today, UW-Madison respects the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation, along with the 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin. So the first class was held at UW-Madison in 1849 and has a long tradition as a land-grant institution in the state of Wisconsin. UW-Madison's status as a land-grant institution ties directly back to the land acknowledgement that I just read. If you'd like more information about what that means, please let me know, and I'd be happy to send you information about the Morrill Act of 1862. Today, social work graduates make up the largest number of graduate students of any program across the university, and that's been the case for the last at least 6 years. So the School of Social Work itself was founded in 1946, and we were first accredited by the Council on Social Work Education in 1952. The school has a long history of training social workers in the state of Wisconsin and beyond. The school officially received a naming endowment as of July 1st, 2020. So if you were someone that was familiar with the school prior to July 2020, you may have noticed this change. If not, you probably didn't. But we are officially the Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work. And with that naming endowment came a significant donation. And we are able to use those funds to create scholarship programs, to do additional programming, lots of kind of things yet to be determined, which is a wonderful way to grow our school. So students entering without advanced standing, meaning that they do not have a Bachelor of Social Work, take 5 courses during the fall and spring semester of their first year of study as a generalist. So courses include field seminar, which is centered around the topic of your field placement, practice with individuals, families, and groups, practice with communities and organizations, human behavior and the environment, social policy, diversity, oppression, and social justice, research methods, and psychopathology. And psychopathology is a course that's required in order to obtain LCSW licensure in the state of Wisconsin, which is why it's part of our curriculum, but you might not see it at other institutions. Besides psychopathology, that first year of study is going to be pretty consistent from school to school because of the Council on Social Work Education accreditation requirements. And so that's just something to keep in mind. You might see human behavior in the social environment at another institution, but it's essentially that same curriculum in that first year of study, and it's the second year where it tends to deviate a bit more. And then in addition to this coursework, students will hold a field placement for 16 hours per week. And we'll discuss fields specifically a little bit later in the presentation. So the advanced generalist here is applicable to both students entering their second year of study and students entering with advanced standing, meaning that they completed their Bachelor of Social Work from an accredited institution, either at UW-Madison or elsewhere. In that advanced generalist year, you take topics courses within your focus area, including advanced practice, policy, macro practice, your field seminar, as well as 3 electives. Electives can be taken outside of the School of Social Work, but they have to be relevant to your degree and be at the graduate level. We've had students take classes through the law school, through psychology, sociology, gender, women's studies. So there's a lot of opportunities to take courses through other units, but we also have a ton of electives within social work as well. So you have options when it comes to that. And then in addition to coursework, you will have an advanced generalist field placement for about 20 hours per week in the academic year. So the MSW program at UW-Madison, as you may have heard me refer, is considered an advanced generalist program. What this means is that, so in social work, based on accreditation, programs are required to have a specialization or multiple specializations. So some schools have multiple specializations, a specialization in mental health, a specialization in child welfare. At UW-Madison, all of our students are considered advanced generalists as their specialization. And this means that you're trained broadly. And so you're much more easily able to pivot between different areas within the field of social work by giving you that broader advanced generalist training. But we do have the option of focus areas. So each focus area has at least one or two sub-focus areas. And then students can also choose not to have a focus area where you pick and choose those topics courses, but it's pretty uncommon, but it is an option. And so the main 4 focus areas are child, youth, and family welfare, health, aging, and mental health. And then again, the option of not choosing a focus area. So again, these focus areas determine essentially the kind of field placement that you'll have as an advanced generalist and the kinds of topics courses that you'll take. So just to give a sense of the different focus areas, child, youth, and family welfare has sub-focus in schools, child welfare, and policy with placements in community agencies, adoption, case management, and policy settings. The schools has placements specifically in the school settings. And child welfare has placements at county child welfare offices across the state. If there's anyone interested, I know some folks did respond to that prompt. It seems like, oh, we do have someone interested in child welfare, and then it seems mostly like mental health. But if there are any other specific interests, and I guess I'm specifically asking about school social work. If you could just let me know in the chat, I can spend some time talking about how school social work is a little bit unique, but if there's no one here that's interested in that, I don't have to spend the time on it. And so I'll just move forward for now, unless someone kind of speaks up about an interest in school social work. So the health focus area has placements in hospice, pediatrics, skilled home care, outpatient and inpatient hospital settings, direct practice, emergency rooms, and in medical social work. The policy sub-focus has placements in health policy settings, such as city, county, and state offices, as well as organizations that advocate for health policy. Just to go back, it looks like Natasha is interested in school social work. So I just want to mention that there's an ability with an advanced generalist MSW program to make those pivots between programs. The one exception is with school social work. And so if you have an interest in school social work, even if you also have interests in other areas, It's generally recommended that you do pursue school social work as your focus area, as your sub-focus of the child, youth, and family welfare focus area, because there's very specific certification requirements in Wisconsin and in other states, in pretty much every state for the most part. There are specific course requirements, specific content requirements that you have to complete while you're a student. And if you don't do that, essentially you have to come back and do a post MSW certificate, either at UW-Madison or somewhere else, to fulfill those requirements. In contrast, if you could do schools and then decide to be a medical social worker, there's no issue there, but you can't do health and then decide to be a school social worker without coming back and doing that certificate. So Natasha, if you have any specific questions, and if there's anyone else interested in schools that didn't speak up, feel free to get in touch with me. I can talk through that a little bit more, or I can answer questions about it when we get towards the end. So the aging focus area has placements in skilled nursing facilities, community case management, health protective services, managed care at the hospice and the VA. The policies sub-focus again has placements at city, county, and state agencies and organizations that advocate for aging policy. The mental health focus area has placements in clinical mental health practice and community agencies, outpatient and inpatient hospital settings, including intensive outpatient settings and partial hospitalization programs, and can involve individual or group counseling, therapy, and medical social work. Mental health policy works with local and state agencies as well as nonprofit organizations like NAMI. So mental health tends to be our most popular focus area. The thing to keep in mind is if you are interested in mental health and you are applying as an advanced generalist, we do ask you to submit a first and second choice if you're applying with a BSW, and you're not guaranteed your first choice. And so that's something important to keep in mind, because mental health tends to be the most popular and tends to fill up the most quickly. If you have questions about that, if you're someone that's in that situation where you have your BSW, you'd be applying to this program as an advanced generalist and you're interested in mental health, let me know and we can talk about that further. But it's important to keep in mind that our MSW program is not considered a clinical program. You can fulfill requirements needed for the LCSW licensure through our program, but we do not consider ourselves to be primarily a clinical program. And then we'll talk more about licensure and what that means a little bit later in the presentation. So in terms of field education, I already discussed a number of the kinds of placements in the last section, but I would also encourage you to check out our field website. We have videos for each of the field units that provides a brief overview of what's discussed and explored within those units and where students are placed. So in terms of the way that our field education program works, it is a little bit different from how some other programs work. So essentially, once you're admitted and you accept our offer of admission, we ask that you fill out a field preference form. On that form, you'll answer questions about access to transportation, your availability, but also what interests you have and the kinds of experiences you've already have and what you want to get out of your field placement. From there, that form goes to the director of field, who then places you into one of several field units. Each field unit is between 7 and 15 other students with similar interests. You'll work with the field instructor to identify 1 or 2 potential field placements. You'll interview with those placements and move forward from there. So it takes a lot of the stress out of the initial kind of field placement process. At other institutions, I got my MSW in Chicago and I was running around Chicago at 15 different organizations trying to find a field placement. And so the onus was on me to find that. Whereas here at UW-Madison, we do a lot of that legwork in advance. We have long-standing relationships with organizations in the Madison area and beyond. And we do a lot of that relationship building on your behalf so that it's more of a seamless process when you're starting your field placement. So that's something to keep in mind. The other piece that's important to understand is that if you are entering as a generalist, so without a BSW, you are doing 2 different field placements. So you'll do one field placement in the first year and a different field placement in your second year. The second year, the advanced generalist field placement tends to be as described, a little bit more advanced. You've got a year under your belt. You tend to be given a little bit more responsibility. And we do ask that those field placements be at different organizations and entail kind of slightly different kinds of work. So just to keep that in mind. And so again, you fill out that field preference form a second time if you are here for both years. As I mentioned earlier, when I was talking about generalists and advanced generalists here, students do hold their generalist field placement for about 16 hours per week in the academic year, and the advanced generalist placement in the second year for about 20 hours per week. In terms of course schedules, courses are typically scheduled on Tuesdays and Thursdays, with most field placements taking place Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Labs, discussions, and field seminars are usually Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but it depends on the semester. Classes are typically offered during the weekday. It's few and far between that there might be a course offered at 4 or 5 p.m. It's definitely not a common occurrence. So that's something to keep in mind when you're thinking about your schedule. It truly is a full-time commitment between classes, field, homework. Truly expect to be committing 40 plus hours a week to being in school. So that's important to keep in mind when you're thinking about the other commitments you might have. The other piece I want to mention is that it's more and more common that we have students that are also working part-time while completing their degree. I can say I worked part-time while completing my MSW. It's kind of the reality of the situation. And it's certainly possible that having a part-time job that's flexible and can offer ideally evening and weekend hours tends to work best. If you do plan to work or you know that you'll need to work, I'd suggest being upfront with your supervisor about the time commitment required by both coursework and field, and make sure it's addressed up front rather than in the middle of the semester. The folks that run into trouble tend to have a lot of commitments or not have a lot of flexibility with those commitments. The other thing to keep in mind too is that you might have a set schedule with field and coursework, but there might be kind of unique opportunities that come up in both places. So you might find out about a special training through the School of Social Work that I'll talk about some of the events that we do a little bit later on, but there might be a great training that we offer for free that you have the opportunity to attend outside of the standard hours that you're coming to the school. Likewise, at your field placement, there might be, a specialized training or a particular meeting that you think would be beneficial to attend, but it's outside of the standard hours that you're normally there. And so having a little bit of flexibility to be able to take advantage of those opportunities is important, and kind of setting that up for success in advance is key. So as I mentioned, we do have a ton of really wonderful events at the School of Social Work. Each year we have our annual Social Workers Confronting Racial Injustice Conference typically, and we've over the last few years held it over multiple Fridays in January and February. And we, since the pandemic, have moved this event online and seen just a huge increase in the attendance. We used to have to cut off capacity at about 500 people. And over the last couple of years, we've served closer to between 2,000 and 5,000. So this is something that if you're thinking about applying to the school, I'd really recommend you attend or go look at past recordings from prior conferences, because it's a really wonderful feature of the school and a really great learning opportunity. And it's typically free and open to the public. So that's something to keep in mind. We also hold a hearing voices simulation, public child welfare dialogues in the fall and spring of each year. We have the Morrissey Mental Health Workshop over the last 2 years. Because of popularity, this workshop focused on I believe a 2 full day long training on motivational interviewing, but typically it changes each year what the topic is. But this is another example of a free training and resource that we provide to our students. We hold a returning prisoner simulation and student symposium. We have a number of other kind of guest lectures and special events and trainings that happen throughout the year. And so there's lots of ways to kind of get involved and learn more outside of the classroom. We have some really wonderful supports in the School of Social Work. Our advisors, Hannah and Belinda, work with our full-time MSW program. They can discuss academic plans, career goals, or provide more general advising. We also have wonderful faculty in the school. So a question that comes up often is about assistantships. Our faculty can provide research assistantships, but these are often reserved for PhD students. More common is being able to apply for teaching assistantships, either within the school if you're an advanced generalist, or more broadly at the institution. As a generalist and an advanced generalist, we have had our students serve as project assistants with the graduate school, with the law school, teaching assistantships with psychology. If you happen to have been a communications major in undergrad and the communications department is looking for TAs, that's another opportunity to get an assistantship. The thing to be careful with assistantships is making sure you understand what you're getting into. Not all assistantships involve tuition remission, but some certainly do. Usually when they do have tuition remission, it's clearly stated. And often when there's not tuition remission, it's not clearly stated. So just read the fine print, reach out if you have questions. Typically those don't materialize until really around June and July, leading into August and September. Unfortunately with assistantships, it's not something you can really plan for too far ahead. But they are a great opportunity. I held an assistantship when I was in my MSW program, and it was an amazing supplement to my MSW program. So, if you have the capacity to do it, it's a great opportunity. It's just about kind of having the patience to find it and make sure that it fits within your schedule. Other departments, like I mentioned, also offer opportunities to MSW students. Faculty are also a great resource if you're thinking about getting a PhD or you're interested in doing an independent study during your MSW. You can do an independent study as one of your electives. We no longer offer a thesis option, so that's important to keep in mind, but you can, as I mentioned, still do an independent study if that's something you're interested in. And then our field faculty are also actively working in the field of social work in addition to serving as faculty, and so they can often serve as subject matter experts within their topic areas. We have a number of really wonderful campus supports, including University Health Services for both physical and mental health, McBurney Disability Resource Center, the Gender and Sexuality Campus Center, and Multicultural Student Center, Social Justice Hub, University Veteran Services, Parent Resources. UW-Madison is a pretty large institution. And so because of that, we have a lot of resources. So if there's something that you had at your undergraduate institution that you're looking for, chances are it either exists at UW-Madison or in the broader Madison community. We also have a number of great student organizations, and folks have been pretty involved over the last few years. Each group has a faculty liaison that works with the group, and we have committees within the school, some of which allow opportunities for student involvement, including Curriculum Committee and the Committee on Diversity and Inclusion. In terms of groups in the school, these groups do receive some funding for programming and events, and if you see a group that's not reflected here, you can always start a new group, but we've had folks particularly in Social Work Student Union and Social Workers of Color Student Coalition have been pretty involved over the last few years. So in order to apply to the full-time MSW program, you do need to submit an application to the graduate school at UW-Madison, as well as a supplemental application to the School of Social Work. Now, that supplemental application is included in the grad school application when you select social work as your field of study. So the graduate school requires a $75 application fee. They do offer a limited number of application fee waivers to make sure that the application fee is not a barrier for students applying to our programs. Eligible students must be U.S. citizens or permanent residents who have participated in an eligible pipeline program, grew up in a low-income family, or were impacted by a recent natural disaster or other urgent unexpected life event that impacts their ability to pay for the fee. If you think you qualify for a fee waiver, either visit the graduate school website or let me know and I'll direct you accordingly. Additionally, if you are denied a fee waiver by the graduate school, but otherwise qualify, get in touch with the school and we can see if there's anything we can do We have had a few students each year of the last few years get in touch because of various issues. You know, one of the things that has come up is students who are DACA recipients are unfortunately ineligible for the fee waiver, but oftentimes the school can provide that fee waiver. Similarly, for students in kind of unique situations, for whatever reason, if they're denied by the graduate school, we can see what we can do at the school level. The one thing to keep in mind, because of where we're at in this cycle, though, is that typically those fee waivers, that process doesn't really start until the application opens, and that application, as you'll see on the next slide, doesn't open until September 7th, 2022. So keep that in mind. After this session wraps up, I will send an email with a link to a number of the resources that I mentioned during this presentation, and included in that list will be the link to the application fee waiver for more information. So as I mentioned, the application opens on September 7th, 2022, which will be here sooner than you think, sooner than I think at least. The application deadline is January 10th, 2023, and all materials, including letters of recommendation, have to be submitted by that date. So we do have a number of prerequisites in order to apply. 30 social science credits are required in order to have your application reviewed. I would say that most folks have the 30 social science credits, particularly if you had a major within social science, so sociology, anthropology, gender women's studies, urban studies, economics, or if you took a liberal arts, you held a liberal arts major where you had courses that were required within the social science area. The folks that run into trouble are folks in theater or music conservancy programs, oftentimes, folks that are in engineering programs, sometimes folks with kind of English or creative writing majors, sometimes don't have enough social science credits. We do have a pretty substantial description of what is considered a social science credit and how to determine that on our website. So keep that in mind. Prospective students that do not meet the social science requirement have to complete those credits before submitting an application. So students from the Madison area will often take courses at Madison Area Technical College or their local community college, or online in order to fulfill the requirement. Again, we have a very detailed explanation of the kinds of courses that count as social science, but if you have questions, let us know after the presentation. So we do require a 3.0 GPA, but if you have not met this, we ask that you address the low grades specifically in the special circumstances box on the supplemental application. There's no limit to the length of this box, and we encourage you to be as specific as possible for explaining the context for why your GPA doesn't necessarily represent your ability to succeed in graduate school. And we encourage you to use your best judgment on this section. But if you have questions, please reach out. And we do a holistic review of each application. So just having that low GPA will not disqualify you from admission. And then finally, this is the piece that gets confusing for folks sometimes. So you need to have a statistics class in order to start the program, not to apply. So you can not have, you don't have to have the statistics course to apply to the program, but by the time you start the program, you have to take it. So oftentimes what folks will do is take it in the summer before starting the program. That's usually what I encourage. If your plans change, what I would hate for you to do is take statistics in the spring, for example, and then, for whatever reason, circumstances change, you decide not to attend the program, and then you've already taken statistics. Statistics is important, and sometimes it's not the most enjoyable course. And so I would just be mindful of the timing if you are someone that has to take it. Students who do not have a qualifying course will often take a statistics course at Madison Area Technical College, their local community college, or at UW-Madison in the summer before starting the program. So we offer a statistics course that meets the requirement in the summer that's online. So that's certainly an option as well. Finally, we provide detailed tips with guidance for how to complete the application, including essay instructions, letters of reference, the transcript. Reviewers will use the same guidance from the instructions to evaluate your application. So our admissions chair each year posts a video with an overview of the application requirements and what we're looking for. Typically, this video is up by the time the application opens. Sometimes there's a delay by a couple of weeks. But I would really encourage you that once that updated video is posted, that you watch it, because it tends to be very helpful in terms of thinking through the different aspects of your application. We have a number of really great funding opportunities at the school. So there are a number of scholarships that you're automatically considered for as long as you submit a complete application. So the Ozawa Scholarship provides tuition and fees for the length of time you're in the program, regardless of residency status. The Ozawa Scholarship typically goes to between 6 and 10 new students each year. The Clark Scholarship provides tuition and fees for 1 year of the program to a Wisconsin resident, and that typically goes to 1 to 2 students each year. And then the Topitza Scholarship provides a $5,000 stipend one time to one incoming student. We also have the Rosenbaum Scholarship, which requires a separate application, so I'll talk about it separately in just a minute. We have the Title IV Public Child Welfare Training Program, which again requires a separate application, so I'll talk about it in more detail shortly. There is a school social work grant for generalist students. So by folks that are interested in school social work, if you're entering as a generalist, I would highly encourage you to consider applying to Project Leads. I'll include a link to this in the email that I send, but this is a program that provides tuition and fees to students that pursue school social work with specialized training in adolescent mental health. And so it really is a great program where you receive supplemental training and financial support. And folks have really enjoyed participating in this program. We also have the fall competition for current students each year. These are awards between $1,000 and $5,000. Typically goes to about 30 students each year, and you can apply each year that you're an enrolled student. There's also resources that the library put together for external grants and scholarships. These would be awards that would be eligible to be used at any institution. So I'd really encourage you to check that out. And then the fellowship resources site that the graduate school put together is another resource where most of those fellowships, some are specific to UW-Madison, but several of them are external awards that are eligible to be used at any institution. So as I mentioned, the Rosenbaum Scholarship does require a separate scholarship application through our WISH scholarship system. The due date is the same day as the MSW application, so that's important to keep in mind. You need to submit your MSW application in order to access this scholarship application. So if you do plan to apply, I would suggest submitting your MSW application at least a few days before that January 10th deadline so that we can deal with any troubleshooting issues. This scholarship does provide full tuition and fees and a stipend for the length of time when you're in the program, regardless of residency status. We typically award this to between 2 and 7 new students each year. It depends on how many continuing students we have. Selection is made during but separate from the admissions process. It's a completely separate committee. And we try to notify folks the same week that they receive the MSW application. Sometimes there's a little bit of a delay because of those separate processes. But I would really encourage everyone to apply for this scholarship. Because it requires an application, we always have less people that we're considering compared to the admission scholarship, since you have to kind of opt in to be considered for this. The award is based on financial need and a commitment to social work. And the application itself has several short answer questions and then one very brief essay that's 1 to 2 pages. A lot of the content that's requested for that essay tends to overlap with the MSW applications. And so it's fine to pull from the MSW application. You just want to make sure it's kind of coherent and understandable on its own in this 1 to 2 page essay. So just keep that in mind. So the Title IV Public Child Welfare Training Program operates with federal funds and provides tuition and fees, a monthly stipend, and funding for books, supplies, and mileage to and from field placements. The program requires work payback for the period of time funded, meaning that you have to work in public child welfare in the state of Wisconsin for 1 year if you're funded for 1 year of the MSW program, or 2 years if you're funded for 2 years of the MSW program. The program offers a cohort model with special events, lectures, a book club, and social gatherings. This program does require a separate application, as I mentioned, which will open towards the beginning of December and will close on approximately January 25th, 2023. We're still kind of finalizing that deadline, but it'll be posted on our website by the time the MSW application opens. If you'd like to learn more about this program, please reach out. We're happy to kind of talk through this program. I would keep in mind that, truly folks that pursue this program are interested in a long, fulfilling career in child welfare. So I would keep that in mind if you're thinking about kind of different funding opportunities. This program in particular, because of the commitments, should really you should really be committed to working in child welfare if you apply to this program. In terms of housing, if you will be looking for housing, the UW-Madison housing website has both on-campus and off-campus listings. On-campus housing used to be pretty difficult to get for MSW students, but that's really changed over the last few years with the pandemic. There are more opportunities to live on campus if you're interested in that. But there's also a ton of off-campus housing available. Madison is a large metropolitan area, and there's lots of people unaffiliated with the university that live here. And so because of that, there's lots of housing and lots of different kinds of housing available. UW-Madison has an off-campus housing website, campusareahousing.wis.edu. I've heard from students that this tends to be more geared towards undergrads, both based on location and the types of kind of housing available. But you can also use other sites like, apartments.com or Adobo, whatever works for you or whatever you've used where you are currently, and find plenty of options that way. Madison also has a pretty good bus system. It can be cheaper sometimes to live a little bit further from campus, but being mindful of trying to find something off the bus line, because campus parking can be challenging and expensive and difficult to get. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about housing. If you have questions about that and relocating, let me know. I relocated to Madison about 3 years ago, and so I've been through that process and love it here now that I've been here. So in terms of certification and licensure, each state has its own requirements. The school's social work provides the degree, not the certification or licensing. So that's an important thing to understand. The school social work typically offers information sessions in the spring for current students on licensure, and we have recordings of past sessions on our YouTube channel. Again, licensure is different in each state. In the state of Wisconsin, you can work with NASW Wisconsin for resources and classes to prepare for licensure exams. Likewise for other states. Oftentimes, if you want to get a better understanding of what the licensure requirements are for a particular state, the National Association of Social Workers chapter will have great resources. So if you're someone that eventually wants to work in Illinois, for example, I'm originally from Illinois, and so I became very familiar before I moved here to Wisconsin with the NASW Illinois website, because they have a little bit easier to understand explanation of what the requirements are for licensure than typically is what is available on the state website, because the state website tends to focus on the state statutes and be a little bit more technical. Whereas the NASW site kind of helps to translate that technical language into what is it that we actually need to do to get the licensure. So that's something to keep in mind. In Wisconsin, as I mentioned towards the beginning of the presentation, you are required to take psychopathology, which is a required course in our program. If you hold a clinical mental health field placement in your advanced generalist year, you if you get your APSW and then receive 3,000 hours of supervision, you can take the LCSW exam to get clinical licensure. Without a clinical placement, you're required to complete 4,500 hours, so about 3 years of supervision to get that clinical licensure. So that's important to keep in mind. And then at the Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work, over 90% of our MSW graduates pass the ASWB, that master's level licensure exam, on their first try, compared to about 75% nationally. So we will stop there. I am going to stop recording.